Welcome to episode 494. Previously, this was a Patreon exclusive release. Don Bertram chats with Hans Rueffert about the Imagica card game, and especially the Luna 7 days, Clive Barker's artwork, and how he got started with his Clive Barker fandom. Previously only available to our Patreon supporters. This is the Clive Barker Podcast, where longtime fans, Ryan and Jose, interview guests, bring you the news, and take deep dives into Barker-related stuff. This episode is available in podcast audio and YouTube video. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive and advocate of his art, but Don's unique and inspiring paintings are for sale, and over 50% of the proceeds go to the Arts and Medicine program at the Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's even a paver in Washington, D.C. representing Celebrate Imagination. We're thrilled that this worthy cause is sponsoring our podcast again this year, and we hope that you'll consider looking over his Pinterest page and commissioning a painting of your own. For commissions, Don requires no money down, and there will be no obligation on your part. You can also head over to the Etsy shop to buy one of his books, like A Chimney Sweep's Tale, Celebrate Imagination, or The Imaginaries. Follow the link in the show notes, or click on the side banner, and let's see what's new with Don Bertram today. Check out Don Bertram's recent painting, Night Creatures, on Facebook. Also, if you want to help out Hans Rueffert, who is the subject and one of the interviewee on here, we've got a link in the show notes to help him with his medical issues that are kind of briefly touched on in this video. Let's welcome our other sponsor, Ed Martinez, and his YouTube channel. Lots of great special effects videos and Barker-related content. What's the latest from Ed? Ed's found some archival footage of Mad Model Party in 1997 where Yasushi Nirasawa had his models, and Clive was introduced to him by Ed. Hey, if you want to help us out, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/BarkerCast589. Our subscribers will get exclusive access to content not available anywhere else, like our Collector's Corner video series, rare Barker videos, and early behind-the-scenes stuff. Our supporters get to help us choose episode topics and even join us on the podcast. Our supporters also get access to the exclusive channel in our Discord server. We'll be forever grateful if you consider helping us out and subscribing to our Patreon. We owe everything to this circle of magicians, so let's give a shout out to our Patreon supporters and see what's new on Patreon. A shout out to our amazing Patreon supporters, David Anderson, Erik Van T Holt, Daniel Elven, Amanda Stewart, Bradley Gartz, Marcus, and David Blair. And of course our sponsors, Don Bertram and Ed Martinez's YouTube channel. So what's new on Patreon? We've got a tour of my new BarkerCast Studio. So there, I go over the history of it, the trials and tribulations, and at the end you get a tour going through the building, which is pretty neat. That's where I'm talking right now. Check that out, if you will. And without any further ado, let's go straight to Don Bertram and Hans Rueffert.
Hello, podcast fans. This is Don Bertram. I'm having the privilege here of interviewing Hans Rueffert, who was the originator and owner of Luna 7, who did all the early prints for Clive Barker in the old days. Anyway, I've been waiting to do this for a long time, and I knew you'd find this interesting. No one, I believe, has kind of delved into the history of Luna 7 before, but here we go. So let me introduce myself. Let me introduce this man, Mr. Hans Rueffert, to you, and go ahead, Hans.
Well, number one, thanks for having me in your home, because I'm here in Houston not to celebrate imagination, but to celebrate my health. And I've been here for a bit of a health hiccup for the last week, and then last month before that too. So it's always challenging to deal with health issues, but I have an amazing team and Ryan, Don. So thank you for allowing me to infiltrate your home.
You're welcome anytime.
And it's like a museum in here, so you should buy your tickets now to the Bertram Gallery. But I met Clive back in 94 or 95 at the World Horror Con when it was in Atlanta. And I might have told the story with the BarkerCast before, but my great aunt was a big fan of Clive Barker, and she was kind of an introvert. She was country, North Georgia, redneck woman, and she would embrace that. But she knew that Clive was coming to Atlanta, and she wanted me to take her to meet him. And,
how old were you?
I was probably 16, 17 at that time. Coming up on, I guess, maybe 18.
Good age.
So, well, when she first started talking about the idea, right, of me taking her to meet him. And she went in for a somewhat routine heart catheterization and died during the procedure.
Goodness.
And I was a fan of Barker, but not a fan of Barker, right? You know what I mean? Like I was appreciative to her, but she was such a fan that I just felt sort of an obligation that I wanted to go and just kind of share her enthusiasm. I'm getting kind of teared up thinking about this.
Did you
edit this out? I don't have emotions.
Had you read anything of Barker?
Yes, in fact, she gave me Weaveworld, a very dog-eared copy of Weaveworld when I was in my teens, and loved it. And
that's a good start.
It was a great start, and it's still one of my favorite. And I raised pigeons as a kid, so there was like that aspect of,
Go figure.
And I kept trying to fall onto our carpet, but I couldn't quite get the grasp of going through it. But so. Anyway, we grew up in, or I live in a town where marble is produced, like very beautiful pink and white marble. And so I wanted to bring something to Clive. Again, not as a personal fanboy, but my Aunt Jo, her name was Jonelle, but everybody called her Aunt Jo, was she wanted to bring something to Clive. Like she just wanted something, and people bring their author fans or movie star fans, tchotchkes and things all the time, like wanting to show their appreciation. So there was an older gentleman in our town that made these beautiful marble kind of desk markers, right? So I had out of white marble a Clive Barker just desk thing, which actually sits on his desk. But last time I was at his house, it's still there.
Was his name engraved in it?
Yes, engraved, exactly right.
Really?
Yeah, and
wow.
so it was beautiful white marble. And so he was at, and it came to Atlanta to the HorrorCon. Bought my tickets, I brought a few books to be signed, had my chance afterwards, and we have photos of that somewhere. I'll try to find them. Amy's got them.
I've never seen them.
And I'm wearing like a white shirt with these nice German leather suspender kind of things. And anyway, I was kind of embarrassed to go up and meet him, but I did, and I told this quick story about Aunt Jo and how she, couldn't be here but wanted. Well, so when I gave him the thing, he said, my grandfather made memorials, made monuments. He worked with marble. He worked with stone, making gravestones and monuments and things like that. So he immediately appreciated the quality of the marble and the engraving, and
Really?
Started a little conversation here. And of course, he just got up and hugged me because I was getting emotional then, talking about her. Again, nobody expects to pass when they're going into these routine medical things, and she passed unexpectedly. So I was still emotional in the moment, and anyway, so he was about to give a panel presentation, and he said, well, just hang out. Afterwards, hang out, we'll talk some more.
And that's the first time you'd seen him?
First time I met him, first time I'd seen him.
That's
So
crazy.
after the thing, we ended up talking, and that entire weekend, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he just kind of adopted me. He was there on his own, didn't have any entourage with him at that thing, that particular event. This, pre-Lord of Illusions. This was kind of a bit of a downtime, I guess. There were no new releases for Barker.
Was that just a couple years into the best cover?
Yeah,
You'd
exactly.
probably been with them maybe 2 years, maybe.
So we just became instant friends, as you do with people that, like, you're cut from the same cloth, you're from the same tribe, for whatever reason. And I also think because I wasn't like fanboying. Like, there were a lot of people that were just like, oh, you know what I mean? And we just, I didn't come at it from that approach. I didn't have that because I really felt like I was there as a proxy, for Aunt Jo. I mean, again, I loved his work, but I didn't have that kind of fanboy thing. So I think he liked, and he told me in later years, he liked the fact that I never once in our long relationship I've ever asked him for anything. You know what I mean? Like there's been times where he's given me things or asked things of me to help him, but we connected on a level that I did not expect, and nor do I think he ever expected. Going to Atlanta, he would come back with any sort of a friend as a souvenir.
Well, was the Weaveworld did you get Weaveworld signed then that first time, or do you remember? What was signed that time?
That's a really good question.
I mean, I was curious if Aunt Jo.
She was all paperback. She was
okay.
in used paperback. She wasn't into collecting anything.
Okay.
She was a quick reader, much like my wife is. They can read a book a day, and still retain it. It's not just they're just flying through
really.
it. They really.
That's a big difference.
I envy that.
Yeah.
in some ways. I now at this age I start falling asleep when I get into these long novels. But
so anyhow, so that's when you first met him, and which is very exciting. When he obviously became very comfortable with you then.
Yeah,
and were you already in the printmaking?
No, not at all. And so that he is 100% responsible for that path. The printmaking came as a byproduct of the Magica game. And, there is, again, we did a BarkerCast longer conversation about this, but just for those who haven't seen that, just the snapshot of that this was at the beginning of the tradable card game, collectible card game phase. This is pre-Pokemon, this is Magic the Gathering, if you've heard of that.
Are we talking about approximately 3 years after the book was published, or am I pushing it too far?
Oh, no, this would have been in 95-ish.
Was the book published in 91, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it was 91.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean you're right. I mean it's a couple of years after.
So enough for the world to know that this was a special book and a deep-seated card game could work well.
Nobody was thinking about a Magica as a card game. Nobody.
Oh, really?
So when my best friend Sean and I, we're heavily into those kind of games, and as we were playing them, we kept thinking, like, mechanically, there's something better. Like there needs to be this arcing story. Unbeknownst to us, Clive and his publisher at the time at HarperCollins were looking to find someone to do a game for Clive. Mm-hmm. And you can bet money on what project or what Barker, franchise they were looking at. It was Hellraiser. I mean, they were looking for, the Pinhead and Bloody Gory. They were looking to make a horror, but they couldn't figure out around what. I mean, what are the mechanics? What's the motivation? What's the story? So Sean and I had this idea to make a game, and we had the mechanics first, and we knew mechanically, because Sean's a math nerd and still is, and
you're a food nerd.
I'm a food nerd, but I mean I love gameplay, and I love a lot of those mechanical things, but he's kind of more of the numbers side. But so we knew we wanted a game, and I was rereading Magic. It was sort of the second time, and I thought, you know what, this is a game. There are 5 dominions, and they were trying to reconcile the dominions. And you've got magicians, you've got warriors, you've got all of this stuff it's
already there. It's already there.
So when I pitched the idea to Clive at the following year's San Diego Comic-Con, I guess it was 96, maybe 95, but kind of gray area for me there. But anyway, I went and actually we'd made a proposal with his blessing. Like, he knew that we were working on this. It wasn't a surprise.
That would have been 95, I think.
It could have been. Well, actually, so that year then...
Because 96 is when it was announced that, remember they had the party? Or?
That was 97.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
well then it could have been 96.
Yeah, that was the year I got married, so that one landmark I do remember. Thankfully. No, so when I went to Comic-Con, that's when Scott Bakula was there. They were doing promo for the upcoming Lord of Illusions.
Okay.
So he was there. So I didn't have a lot of time to talk with him, but we had a chance to give him the physical proposal with some of the proposed artwork, which was mainly done by friends of ours. Anyway, I expected weeks later he would get back to me. The very next day when I got back to Atlanta, the day after the convention, so the Monday following the convention, he called and he said, "This is brilliant. This is exactly, you saw a game in a novel that I would have never considered." And he goes, "But it's perfect. It's like the book was written to be a game." And so he called John Silversack, who was his editor at HarperCollins, and convinced him that we should have a meeting. And so, again, trying to condense this into a very short story is they eventually rewarded us with the game. But Clive from the beginning said it's got to have beautiful art, and I want to have, there was a handful of artists that he was desperate to have. I had a handful of artists that I was desperate for him to see, Richard Kirk being one of them.
Mm-hmm. Who ends up in a handful of limiteds.
Oh, yeah. And they still have a relationship. He's Richard Kirk still doing things with Clive. So I was the art director for that project. We had 330 different images we had to source, some of which were public domain older pieces that Clive had recommended that inspired him.
But not Clive art.
Clive agreed to do exactly one image, which was Piopa. And at first he didn't want to put Piopa's likeness down because he wanted it to be, it's in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't have just fill in your image here. Pi was such an important part of the story and had to be in the game.
But in the long run, he did contribute a couple more pieces
so
for the cards.
He did some promo pieces, but what he did was he did more kind of sketch style things, and that which was great because then it set them apart from the regular cards. The cards had this sort of textural feel to them, and then to have a handful of black and white cards, those were playable and they were part of the whole game, but you didn't have to have them to play.
Okay, well, give the audience an idea of who some of these other artists were involved, because we're talking about a big deal for Clive in regard to a project, yet Clive's art was rather limited in it. It involved a handful of a lot of artists. Name a couple of the people that people might know.
You might know Ted McKeever was a big comic book artist at the time. Tom Taggart, who still is a dear friend of ours and does great sculptural work, and like the idea of using sculpture, a 3D thing in a 2D card game, was exciting, and we could work with the lighting and create mood, and so we really tried to push the envelope a lot. Eric Denyer, who at the time was really riding high in his career.
Seems like you had some H.R. Giger in there too, didn't you?
We had H.R. Giger, and we had Baczynski.
Yep, we had Baczynski.
And all with permission. So Clive knew these guys, and I can't think of the name of the gentleman who represented Giger at the time. The gallery that.
Oh goodness.
Morpheus Gallery, but the gentleman's name.
Well, you're not talking about Jim Cowan.
Yeah, Jim Cowan.
Okay.
Yeah, so Clive connected me with Jim Cowan, and we got permission to use to those things.
I thought he was Giger was associated with a New York galleries, and there was a man there that was his representative here. But Jim Cowan actually could give you permission.
Yeah, that's who Clive connected me through. And
Clive, well, he was in L.A., so he was on. I forget the name of the street, but not far from Sunset and getting up to Clive's house and with the hills,
Well, there was a few people too, like Ted Nafee, who had done a lot of comic book art, but hadn't done much beyond that. But it was a name that Clive had seen him in, like Illustrator magazine, like Spectrum, and so we've had a lot of up and coming artists that we were happy to showcase and give them a platform. And then we had some artists like Omar Rayyan, who was well established.
That's big. He's a big man too.
And he didn't need to do the project. He just wanted it. He loved the idea. He thought it would be a fun thing. So I think he did 2 images. So it was neat that a lot of those games at the time had one style and one. It might be multiple artists, but they fit within sort of a mood or a genre. Where we had things that were pastels. We had things that were paper cut. A guy named Ralph Groff, who did these amazing paper cut layered things that were airbrushed. And you would never know it from the reduced card, but the originals were large and intricate, and so Clive really wanted. Magica was meant to represent the so many different things, and the different dominions could look differently. So he wanted to have a very diverse.
That's a very unique. I can't remember any other project anyone did that had that vast array of different artists all in one. And even now, and it's been 30 years or whatever. Those cards are showing up on eBay all the time, and the complete sets. I remember you handed out. Seems like fold outs that were kind of
They were playmats.
They called
playmats. It was kind of like a thing you could put down, and you didn't need it, but for somebody learning the game, it would kind of show you how you place the cards, because there was no board. Everything was played on a tabletop with cards. But with all of them, it would say in the rules, kind of, you'd set up your dominions here, and the object was essentially that. If you played a dominion, the other person could also get it, because if you've read the book, basically you had to have a representative from each dominion, and you have to have 5 of them to form a synod, and then you try to attempt the reconciliation. And
you remember all that stuff. Yeah. It's amazing that is in your brain.
Well, if I sat down to play the game today, I think I would need somebody.
How many times do you think you read that book?
I've listened to it at least 50 times, but
no way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You mean the audio version?
Yeah, the audio version, because even when I was going through I had to be encyclopedic about finding every character, every insect that was the Zarzi, which were the mosquitoes that were biting into the train station in Patashokwa, so there were so many little details, and all of them could be utilized. Yeah. And plus, we had the idea to make an expansion. We were going to do a sort of a second part of the game. And HarperCollins, they got our division of HarperCollins got purchased by Avon Publishing, and they stopped all of that. So.
Well, I hate to wrap
up
the Magica section, because it's really so fascinating, and I love it. That's my favorite book. That's my favorite Barker book. And it's amazing that Hans honed in on that too.
Oh yeah.
But you know, there's so many angles to that. Now, at that time, had you started Luna 7?
No, so that's
Okay,
the reason I
so-
mentioned all of that is we now had this gaggle of 50 plus artists that we were working with, and my mother-in-law, my wife's mother was an artist, so we had worked with her trying to get some of her very painted, beautiful pieces made into giclées, and giclées were kind of a new.
They were. That was the
Right.
beginning of giclées.
Right, and the cost was ridiculous. I mean, astronomically ridiculous. So as I started working with all these artists, they were all having the same problem: is that they wanted to be able to sell their prints, but their cost as an artist was so incredibly high that it might cost them $60 to make a print like this, and then they would have to then triple it at least, because by the time you add all of that in, and so
Sure.
then it made it for the average collector so the barrier to entry was so
Unaffordable.
high that yes, you would sell a handful of them, but it wasn't. It was just a backwards equation. So after the game was done, and again, I had made friends with 95% of these people that I'd worked with, and still in contact with a large majority of them. But we kept hearing this common theme is that they wanted to make prints and they couldn't afford it. I had a framer in our little hometown of Jasper who had dabbled in printmaking, but mainly, again, it was kind of nothing limited. It was just utilitarian printmaking. And in conversations with her about what a racket framing is. Now, again, it's a skill. It takes time.
That's true.
So I'm not knocking framers, because believe me, I know that's hard work, and there's an art to it as well.
And there's cost to run the business.
Yeah, I'm not knocking any of that, but there's a lot of profit in the actual trim and the mats and things like that, because it's more of a skill than a hard cost for them. And so we really found out through her, Mrs. Gooch, who was my piano teacher as a kid, that.
Not to Miss Gooch.
Yeah, well, she's no longer with us, but
not in her direction.
that's right.
Anyway.
So she kind of told us with print, like, it's ridiculous that with lithographs you gotta the per print price might be low, but you got to do 1,000 of them for it to make sense, right? And so even with, again, she knew enough that with the early giclée stuff to say that the cost is really not that high. That you can print on demand. Now the machines are high, the ink is high, the canvas is high, but not what they were charging. I mean, it was literally like a 70 times markup for these artists. Mm-hmm. And it was just sort of understood that the artist might make 10%. And we just thought, that's ridiculous. This is their art. The printer should make 10%. They should make 90%. Like, this is not, to me, the equation was just so.
Did you have a conversation with Clive about that?
Yeah, because he, at the same time.
Did that have anything to do with him saying, this is the man that I want to?
Maybe, because, I mean, again, we really did connect on such a, and maybe that's from my point of view. He might say something different.
Oh, no.
But,
he felt the same way.
We have had a long friendship, but he felt the same way because he had looked into having art, and he had some art prints made. And the gallery was taking this giant cut, right? And Clive deserved the bigger, in my opinion, any artist, they deserve the lion's share of it. And then the people that are printing and distributing and whatever, they should make money on it too, but it shouldn't be the other way around, right? It should be they're focused on the art, and these other support things should make their crumbs.
Okay, so you were coming into the picture at this point. I understand exactly where you're coming from. In essence, to make it more affordable, not only to the public, not only to the artists, but by doing that, the public can actually afford the prints, because the artist doesn't have to add on just so they can cover their inventory. So Luna 7, that's an unusual name.
Yeah.
Have you ever explained why you guys decided to call it Luna 7?
Honestly, we loved that half moon. We love sort of that half dark, half light moon. I mean, there's obviously so many things you can read into this sort of light and dark dichotomy.
Did you draw
not the original one, no. There's actually a friend of our friend, Kazra Gambari, that did the final logo.
Oh, really?
But we loved that version of the moon, and that actually happens to be the 7th phase of the moon.
Oh.
And so that's how it came about, is we were thinking of a name of what's the 7th phase of the moon, and so I think Amy just said, what about Luna 7? Instead of 7 moon or whatever, Luna 7, and we just loved it just had a flow and a rhythm, and so it stuck. And Clive also, now, we had done one print under the name Coelacanth Productions, and the Coelacanth.
Which one was that?
That was the original Pilot Pop poster.
You did those?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But that was kind of an offshoot of the game company, the ZI Games. And we did that as a promotional piece for the game, right? So we had a little experience making a print.
And that's why it was on those, the badges and Dragon Con.
That's right.
You had that file to produce those.
So that was our first foray into printmaking. But again, that was
for Clive.
For
Luna 7.
It was for the project. Again, it was called Coelacanth Productions because we didn't want it to be under ZI Games, and we just picked a name. Coelacanth is a fish that they thought was extinct a zillion years ago. Richard Kirk did a tattoo of a coelacanth on me. That's another 2 hours. You got to pay extra for that for me to take my shirt off. You don't want to see that. So anyway, so Luna 7 really was the idea was to be a bit of a co-op, because when Clive said, "Look, I'll buy the equipment if you'll help." I'm a stickler for detail. I love the color correction, which the technology has come way farther now, but. And
you were responsible for that.
Oh, I have 100% of it. I hand pulled
every
one of those
things.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And I can still smell the ink and hear the hum of the machine. And so, but there was a financial barrier to entry. And Clive said, "Look, I will front load this if you will make this available to every artist." And so what we did was for artists who didn't so we didn't have the artists who didn't have the money to just buy the prints outright. So we kind of worked two ways. We worked as a print shop, where if somebody just wanted to make 10 prints for an event that they were doing, they could hire us to do it, and we had a price per square foot, which included either canvas or nice sort of watercolor paper, and it was incredibly fair price. And again, it was like 1/70th of what, if somebody was paying $60 a print, we were so realistically 1/10. We were probably charging $6,
which is amazing.
Right.
So you had a handful of artists now that you knew, so that these guys would be using you more than likely. Clive had made it obvious that he wanted this available to all the artists that it could be available to. So that was your first little group of people to, and I'm proud to say I was actually in that group. So I'm very proud to have that for a different reason, but still I was there. And that's a great thing.
But obviously. We wanted to be not exclusive in the sense that there was some bar that you had to pass or some time. We wanted to surround ourselves with people that we liked, of like minds, that had that same energy, enthusiasm. It was meant to be a sort of a co-op or a collective. But for artists that didn't really have the money to buy prints, what we would do is because you could print on demand, we would just have it ready, and then if somebody ordered it, we'd print them, we'd send them to the artist, they'd sign it, they'd send it. So we tried to be a co-op print shop, and it worked really well. I mean,
and you got to remember, this was back then. This was completely novel. I mean, nowadays you could. I mean, I'm not sure about the quality of the product you're going to get, but you can find somebody that can print you off one or without even batting an eye. But nobody had done this back then.
I'm telling you, if you go to any UPS store, the printer that they have is quite honestly better than what we were printing with. The technology-wise, but
that's 30 years ago.
Yeah, 30 years ago, you didn't have. It wasn't automated. I really had to go through hundreds of iterations to get the exact right. Because these weren't digital things; these are actual paintings we had to photograph.
Yeah.
So we then had to.
That's an expensive process.
Right. We photographed them to film because back then the digital, you could have digital cameras, but the resolution was so low. There's no way you could print this size. So we'd shoot them to a 4x5 medium format transparency, which we would then have digitally scanned at a special shop. So there was a cost involved in doing all these things, but that was the only way to faithfully reproduce or capture, number one, and then number two, reproduce those.
And it's funny you should bring that up, because I had to get one of those for Clive myself, and I remember it was a huge
it's a
4x5
negative.
It was a huge piece. And of course, I didn't pay for that for him. He ended up buying that because he used it for the Hellcat painting. And I had no idea the cost you have to pay a photographer to develop that picture for. And if you were doing that for all of those.
The other thing too you don't think about is you have to have the camera completely perpendicular to the image. Because if it's even going 1 degree this way or this way or this way or this way, it throws the lighting off. It throws it. So it is a very precise thing. And even today, if they're doing it digitally, it still has to be perpendicular to the camera. Otherwise, you're going to get that.
I could see that.
So there's a lot of things you don't think about, and we kind of had to learn. Now, luckily with Clive's connections, he connected me with a lot of people that had made some of those mistakes before.
Yes.
And we talked to off camera. We talked about Every Picture Tells a Story in LA, and they'd done some printmaking, and they were a great resource. And there were several people that Clive connected me with that were happy to share the mistakes that they'd made, so we didn't have to bump our heads down that road.
So, veering away from the technicalities of it, what was the first project that you really did besides Pa, which was not
right?
To me, that was more of a commodity of sorts.
Yeah, it was a promotional piece,
yes.
right? So we did a series of prints called the Fish Hat prints, which you own one of the originals for, and those are black and white. But now those were done as like a lithograph style, or like still a traditional printing thing.
That's true. And they were cheap.
Yeah, and they were exactly.
That's why you see the price.
Yeah, they were $20, $25 is what we charged for them.
Right.
But again, we had to do thousands of them, and so then we had to keep them, and that was a nightmare. So we knew that this was the direction, Giclée was the direction, because this image right here was the first one that I really played with. Babylonian. And it was tough, right? Because there's so many colors going on there and so much. It's a busy piece. The first printer we had too was limited to 17 inches wide, and that fit that format. I mean, scale wise. So this was really the first one that we played with, and then our friend over here. So we had it was Abarat, and Abarat was bubbling, and obviously right on Clive's mind, and he was so prolific at the time. And you've seen those paintings, and they were huge, and
they were huge,
and there was an energy to them, and so we wanted to capture that energy. So that really was for the Clive pieces. That was our learning thing, and I would send Clive packages of 3 or 4 prints. He would send me the negatives that he'd taken. I would have them scanned, and then I would print out smaller pieces, and he was just excited. He couldn't wait. He would call me like, I got your package, and why don't we do this one, or this one's a little green, or we need to go a little more yellow with that, because I didn't have the luxury of being next to the painting, and he did.
So when we talk about Clive Barker's involvement with Luna 7, to what degree that went, you kind of mentioned already that he actually got the printer. That was his printer,
Yep.
And of course it takes a skill to run the printer and someone that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Of course, Hans gave up that was all his baby. But after that, what did Clive have to do? Did he pick these, or did he say, I don't want that one? Don't give me that one. Do you know this? Did any of that happen?
So, I went often twice a year to LA. I live in Atlanta area, and so I would fly out there, and we would spend 2 or 3 days together, just in with the pictures and kind of looking at them, and I would bring test prints, and we would do that a couple times a year, and oftentimes the ones that meant something to him would not sell. There's
go figure.
But that happens to me.
It happens to me.
Yeah, some of my favorite food that I could cook or whatever, it's not going to be the best seller on the menu.
Yeah.
And so there has to be, you can't cherry pick the it factor out of an image. You don't know why somebody's going to connect to a certain the mischief piece right there. I mean, it's a crazy looking piece with like the antlers and the skulls, and but people connect with that, But if you were to describe that to somebody, it was this demon with horns and skulls, and he's you never know what's going to connect with somebody. So we did have some flops early on, and that we were excited about them and they didn't sell. And then we also had some surprises that we just thought, well, let's try. And there were a few of them that we did, especially for a convention when he would be appearing at.
I remember.
And so those were very limited. We made a smaller print run of them and almost always sell them out.
Talking about that, what was the average print run on these?
95, I think, was. This one was 50. Yeah, this is 95.
This is 95.
Yeah, he wanted it to be less than 100.
Every once in a while. See, this is 95.
That was the average.
Wasn't this one of Clive's favorite?
Yeah, he loved that one, and so that always made me happy. Like when he got giddy and excited, because that man, if you've ever met him, he's so full of creative energy. Like he's mentally juggling 60 things at one time,
and he still is.
He is, absolutely. But when he would latch on to something with his enthusiasm, I mean, it's contagious. I mean, it's absolutely contagious. And
that's what's so good. That's what's so exciting about it.
And so
you want to be infected. That's what it amounts to.
But to me, it was never about making money. I mean, it really wasn't. Obviously, there were costs with doing things.
Yeah.
To refill the printer of inks was about $800.
That's insane.
And we were going through that. I mean, it's a lot of ink, right? So
look at this piece here. This is the huge.
Yep.
Oscar Wolfswinkel right here, and I mean, there's not many of these.
Right.
To pull this to actually print this and pull it. In fact, I don't even know if there's a number.
There's a number. I just can't. My eyesight is not.
Let's look and see.
Everything's going to fall down. So this is what you're
waiting. Yeah, that's right. I should have been prepared for this. Hang on just a minute.
You didn't do your homework.
No, I didn't. What does that say?
All right. That is 12. So there were 12 of these.
There was going to be 12.
No, you're right.
I don't think that there was 12. I would be surprised if there's 5.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that that's kind of the cool thing about the print on demand is that you can print what you need. But it's a really cool technology, and it captured. And I love doing it on the canvas. I thought the canvas gave it a textural feel.
That was unique.
Yeah,
I don't remember ever getting anything on a canvas except maybe some reproductions, some other kind of multiple reproductions, and even that. I mean, really.
Yeah.
This stuff gives a whole texture to it.
Right.
It's got definitely something going on.
For you watching this, there is a layer of plastic in front of it, so you might be thinking it's too reflective.
Yeah, and I need to lean it back, so maybe it won't be so
It's
bad.
actually a matte canvas, or sort of like a middle matte canvas, so it's not glossy, it's not flat. So it is the right amount of sheen that it captures the color, but it's not going to have like a reflective side where you can't see the image.
That's true, and that's important too,
You make me think of something with Clive too. Like again, at the same time a lot of this was happening, I was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And so there was a time where my ability to be productive, to be, you kind of have this idea of what I can do is the equivalent of my self-worth. And so as I was going through so many surgeries, and quite honestly, I'm still going through those challenges, the prints were a way for me it was very cathartic for me because I was able to spend time with them when I wasn't physically feeling strong. I was able to still feel this sense of accomplishment. I was still able to be involved in something.
Important.
It was incredibly important for me, selfishly, but also I think it also kept this connection open. I mean, when I was going through my first surgery, you were literally physically there in the hospital. But Clive at the time was calling me almost daily, or if he wasn't calling me, he was calling my wife Amy.
They called. Actually, I was to get in touch with him the night after the first surgery.
Right.
We got the time and all, and actually he called here, and it was a very, very moving conversation. Probably shouldn't be a public conversation, but he literally, he literally was sobbing on the phone.
Yeah,
he was so happy that you'd made it through the surgery, and that was 14 hours on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I was asleep the whole time, but I'm told that it was.
No, we weren't, and yes, it was tough. But anyway, get away from that.
No, I just mentioned that to say that it was an important part for me because I was able to do something that I felt contributed to this overall
the potential healing property of art.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't overestimate that. But anyway, so how many of these did we end up doing, or did you end up? I'm sorry, I didn't include myself in that. I was there the whole time. It seems like
that's a great question. Maybe 35, 36, something like that. I mean, there were a few one-offs too that Clive would have me do for literally like a party gift. There was one that was when they got married, and
that's right, the wedding between him and David. There was a special one. There was that erotic one that was done to be handed out to the Cenobites and to Ashley Lawrence.
Yep.
We did that on the podcast. We showed that because I couldn't remember if Hans had actually printed that, but I saw it was on his same canvas.
Yeah, it is.
And it had to have been his,
which is funny because he asked me when he first showed it to me, he said, I don't think I did that, but then when I looked at it close, I'm like, yeah, that's one of mine.
That's one of yours. A very unusual film. I don't think they ever offered that for reproduction.
Yeah, not that I know of.
Whereas the wedding gift, you could get that done, I think, through that Phil and Sarah printer or whoever they were using.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're doing now, but as unusual as it is, but there was probably 4 or 5 that were for specific Fangorias or whatever whatever he was at the time, which you would think, and they were smaller ones, by the way. They weren't the big ones. They were more like 12 by 12.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Well, the thing that Clive said from the beginning, and part of the reason that he was so adamant about doing this was it wasn't just about making the price lower for the artist. He wanted the fan to be able to buy something. And at the time, Mark Ryden was doing prints that were $12,000 a piece. That was for the basic print, right? I mean, I'm talking about Mark Ryden.
Oh, I know. I definitely know who he is.
They were insanely expensive.
That's how much he was asking.
Now there were smaller pieces for less, but I mean, like a print like this guy would have been in the 5 figures. And Clive just thought, my fans are, I want them to have this. I want them to hang it on the wall. I want them to be proud of it. I want it to be signed. I want it to be limited, but I want it to be something that they can afford. And so I think at the most they were $300 for a big one, and then some of them were in the $100 range or whatever it was. I really can't remember. But the goal was to make it affordable. So it wasn't just about making it where the artist could afford the print. It was so that everybody could afford the prints.
And I'm thinking that the vast majority of the Luna prints on canvas sold out.
Oh yeah, and oftentimes pre-sold. You had a certain number reserved.
Well, I knew that I was going to back the project no matter what.
Yeah.
I was backing everything. I was even going to as many of the art shows I could, and even if I obviously didn't need a piece, and I didn't always get the expensive pieces, but I was always going to support his art career.
Yeah.
And this is hitting it right at the root level. Yeah. There was something other interesting thing when I had been with Hans in Georgia a couple of times. He would get a packet of art from Clive, from like his desk, and this would be, and I've always wondered what these would be, one of a kind, of course, pieces that Clive had used kind of in the making and production, or considering it, using his imagination leading up to other art that he did. And I always wondered what that was, and I knew that it probably wasn't something that Hans was going to be making prints out of. So what did he end up doing with that?
Well, so I'm not sure what ended up happening with it, but I can tell you what the idea behind that was, is that we were having a conversation. In fact, I got...
Well, and I just want to butt in for just a quick second, in case you're not aware of the type of art we're talking about. These are the sketchbook pieces that have the stains of coffee and maybe a footprint on it, that kind of stuff.
Right,
it would come in 20 different pieces at a time.
It would be a complete hodgepodge of what have you. So my background is a chef, and so I use a lot of food analogies, and in fact I got to make omelets for Doug Bradley and Clive at Clive's house a couple times. So, but we were having the conversation about making mistakes and how important mistakes are in the creative process, and that people think that they can just start at the top level, but I used the cooking analogy to Clive that it's the meals that end up in the trash can or in the dog bowl, that those are the ones you learn from, right? It's learning what you can't do sometimes helps you define what you can do, but also repetition is the mother of all learning, and so you have to keep making these mistakes until you don't. And so Clive was relating. He said, he didn't just start like this, right? He had a bunch of things that he had to get, a lot of scaffolding that had to get to where he could paint the ceiling of Mona Lisa, right? So he. I'd like to see his version of the painting of the ceiling in the Mona Lisa of the church. I'm sorry.
I know
you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. It's the Sistine Chapel. The
That's
roof
right.
of the Sistine
That's right.
Chapel.
The Crisco Chapel. So anyway, so he said, well, look, I have all of these discards, these cast-offs that to him literally were cast-offs. They were an idea that he had, let's write it down, that might turn into this, right? Mm-hmm. And even those fish hat prints, they were black and white pen and ink kind of things that ended up turning into, painted pieces. So his idea was, let's collect these in some fashion, in a book, in a slideshow that we put on the website. He just wanted to encourage the people that were afraid to pick up that. You were inspired to pick up the paintbrush by Clive.
Oh yeah.
And he wanted people to know that even he had things that weren't at the A grade. They might be F grade, but he had to do those in order.
It's a matter of opinion anyway. Some people maybe think Clive's work is at F grade, as far as we know.
But there's also something people love to look behind the glass. They want to see what's behind the scenes, and so this is the this is the ribs, and this is the bones of what becomes his art. That he would send me those, and I would photograph them where those are. I would always send them back, so I have none. I don't own any of them.
I think I saw a couple of packets of those, and maybe a dozen or so in each packet, or 15 in each packet.
Yeah, you never know.
Very interesting, and you're right. You never know.
Yeah, never know what you're going to get. And then, like I said, what the end goal was just. I think he knew that there was a story there, and maybe not a literal story, but there's a lesson to be learned that you don't start at the top. You start at the bottom, and in these little things, even if they end up in the trash can in the recycling bin, you have to do them. You got to work through those to be able to get to that next level.
Well, it's funny, I think a lot of people really love those Luna prints big time because your G clays, because they really don't show up. There was a lot of them. When you start talking about 20, 30 different images,
right. Times
ranging
95
from 12 to 95 copies
yeah.
of each. There was a bunch of those out there, and they very seldom show up for sale anywhere.
Well, hopefully that means people still like them and enjoy them and display them.
I think so.
I've seen them hanging, and they've held up color-wise really well. I tell you, they held up better than Clive's signature. Because
I forgot about that.
Because Clive loves a Sharpie. That man loves a Sharpie, and that's fine and good. But Sharpies aren't as lasting as this. This is considered museum archival quality ink.
Yeah,
Sharpie is not.
So what ended up happening? What I know what you're referring to. So what happened?
I can show you right here. Grab this lighthouse piece. You can see the yellow bleed around the signature. I don't know how well you can see it on here.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to see.
But there is a faint yellow bleed, and it's nothing wrong with it. It almost looks like it's glowing, right?
Like maybe he painted and then wrote on the page.
Yeah. So it
wasn't like that in the beginning.
The actual signature isn't degrading.
Kind of goes with this.
Yeah, it really does. It looks intentional. But no, that's all it is. Again, you can still perfectly see his signature. The signature itself didn't fade.
Right.
It just it bleeds a little bit, and not in a normal Clive Barker bleeds kind of way. No cool blood.
That's right.
Blood dripping effect. But that's it. And I did finally find him some museum quality archival by Stadtlein, or like a German thing. He used them like a week and then lost them. And
we were back to this.
We were back to this. I think it was Bob Humphreys. It was just like, dude, he's just going to grab a Sharpie and he's going to sign them. So it is what it is.
And you have to realize how many things has Clive signed. I mean, it's unimaginable. This painting is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
As you've seen it in person, I have too.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the.
Yeah.
I don't know who has that painting now.
Well,
I don't even think it was ever for sale.
Well, I know that, and I hate that I can't think of her name right now, but the owner of Every Picture Tells a Story wanted to buy the original, and Clive wouldn't
do it.
Yeah.
He wouldn't do it. All of these that were the core
Right,
of
the original,
Abarat
yeah.
were at one time I thought were maybe going to be on display at different areas around the world.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened with that, but what a great idea.
I think they did in LA one time a gallery, but that was easy because it was down the hill from where.
Yeah, but but that was like an introduction to the Abarat.
Right.
That was when Disney offered him that option at the very beginning. But for them, they weren't for sale.
Right, they were just a display.
They were just there. He had mentioned to me one time how one of his goal was to have a traveling, not an 18. Well, I don't know how we would do this, but 18-wheeler or whatever.
It would have to be as big as they are.
It has to be bigger than that.
Yeah.
And have all of these inside, and it go from kind of different areas around the world or in the United States, and have school kids come in and see the process, maybe a little video, maybe a little audio or something to go with them. But to stand in front of some of these paintings, it's an experience.
No, it is for sure.
And how could that not inspire a child that was art inclined, especially?
Yeah.
To try to do something.
Well, I'll share one last story. We're getting long in the tooth here.
But, go to fig. What do you expect?
Yeah. So one of the more recent times that I visited Clive, still a few years back, he had a young man who in the military, and I don't want to overshare his details, but who was writing to Clive and saying how Clive inspired him, and Clive said, I had no idea that I could have this kind of an impact on a person. And I said, Clive, you already have. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, when I first met you, I was that kid who stayed up playing video games till 4 a.m. and then slept until noon the next day. And I checked the boxes of the things I had to do, but I had no oomph. And it wasn't until that meeting with Clive and being around somebody that had that kind of buzzing, creative, palpable energy that I thought, man, I'm wasting time. Like I got stuff to do. And I didn't really know what it was I had to do, but just being around him was such a contagious, and I keep using the word contagious in a post-COVID world, maybe that's not the best term, but it was inspiring.
Yes.
On such a, core level. And then I started waking up early. I started taking long walks in the morning. My wife at the time was working at a job that she had to get up at 4:30 in the morning. I started getting up with her, and I started writing, and something about that man was the catalyst. And I wasn't trying to emulate. I'm not a painter or anything like that. I felt like this guy's juggling so many, and I'm just barely watching my ball roll down the hill. So I truly credit. He was that sort of spark in a lot of ways, and he literally hugged me and was in tears, and he said he had no idea that he had that much impact on me, but he had and still has, and life moves on, and I hate that we aren't as close as we are,
A lot of things change.
Yeah.
Things change.
Yeah.
Things change.
What I will say is that it's one of those friendships that when we do talk, it's as if it was yesterday, right? So there's no like, oh, why hadn't you called me, or I hadn't seen you. Like it just picks back up like you hop right back on the ride. So.
Well, you were important. You were big time important at that time. So to a lot of people. And so was Linda Seven,
Well, I'm glad it was. Like I said, it ran its course, and my health issues kind of got to the point. And honestly, technology got to the point where the artists were also looking at us to make little mini websites for them because they didn't want to deal with that. And so we kind of did all of that for them. And now it's so easy to do that even you could do it.
I don't know about that. I could hire you to do it.
Not anymore. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. But anyway, it was a great thing, and I'm glad that we did it.
And it did not introduce you to so many people.
Oh, incredibly! And again, they're lifelong friends. I mean, lifelong friends. Despite my best efforts, they're
you make it easy. You make it easy. But anyway, we'll wrap that up. It's gotten longer than we thought it would, and we're going to go ahead and try to photograph all the different prints that I have, which I think are all the Lunas. Yeah. I only think I don't have one, and I believe it was the very last one called The Mask, and I'll find an image somewhere.
The red mask one? That was
yes,
one? Okay.
Yes. Wasn't that the last? That was the very last one that you did.
You're right.
That one I didn't get, and for whatever reason at the time, so I'll try to put a piece in there, but I'll try to include a slideshow after this. And we can't thank this guy enough for this amazing interview.
No, I'm happy to. I just happened to be in.
You happen to be. We're walking down the street.
You snatched me
in Texas. Well, there you go. You couldn't be in a pro place. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Big love.
All righty.
Thank you.
Coming next, we'll be talking with Nicholas Vince on his documentary, I Am Monsters. And then also we've got Jericho Squad will be coming back again for a final episode, the confrontation with Apexamendios. The next book club of Blood will be discussing the short story Hell's Event. So read that one in anticipation so we can all chat about it. And then, of course, episode 500, the big one. So we're still working on that. Still looking for your feedback. So if you want to send us a voicemail, we would really appreciate that. Go on the website, click on the side banner, the Speak Pipe side banner to send us a voicemail, and we'll get it in there in the episode 500. So we'll talk about, just feel free to talk about what do you like about the podcast? What would you like to see change? What are your memories of it? Have you been with us since the unfortunate episode 1? Back when we were still kind of getting a feel for what podcasting was. Way back in January of 2012 was when we started. Yeah. So we would really appreciate that. Anybody that's willing to do that for us would be a huge help. And that being said, this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed or followed our podcast. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that's not affiliated with Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. You can chat with us on our Facebook BarkerCast listeners group, our Facebook page, Reddit, Blue Sky, or our Discord server. Have you already bought our book? The BarkerCast Interviews Occupy Midian, available in Amazon hardcover, Kindle, and Apple Books. Join our Patreon and become a patron to get access to exclusive stuff, pick an episode topic, or maybe join in the discussion. You can also buy a t-shirt in our TeePublic store. Just go to teepublic.com/stores/BarkerCast. Leave a voicemail for us on the SpeakPipe link on our blog, and we might put it in the episode. Opening and ending music generously provided by Ray Norrish.
Thanks for listening.